All right, it's good to see everybody this evening. Had a little bit of difficulty with my setup. You see, it's still not as good as it needs to be. When I did my test drive, I was using it on the video mode, but then when you go to Facebook Live, it's a different set and different setup, and so I'm still not pleased with the way that it looks. But of course, you can't do much with that right there. But I was hoping the picture would be a little bit better. But before we get started, I just want to make a couple of announcements, make a couple of statements. As I always say, some housekeeping matters. Got word today that our former neighbor, our community, Vince Ham, is not doing well. Vince has been in the nursing home in Winfield for some time and contracted coronavirus, and has since been airlifted to Tupelo and is not doing well. In fact, I think they've probably taken most of the life support away from him, and I think it's just a matter of time. And so we want to just keep Miss Polly and her daughters, and of course Doug's sons in your prayers, and pray for Doug that his passing will be as easy as possible. And so we want to just keep that family in your prayers. Also, we'll make mention that my mom's doing really well. She's went home on Thursday and has done quite well. In fact, she watched the morning. I know she watched the morning broadcast today, and so we're thankful for that. And I'm continue to be thankful for all of the cards. She continues to just tell us about who all sent in her cards and whatnot, and we're just so thankful for that. And mom's doing real well, and we'll see how things progress with her stem cell transplant. This is the first time it's been a long time since I've done this just using my phone. I brought my camera set up, and I thought, well, it's just going to be too much trouble. So this is just a straight phone setup with no YouTube until it posts later, and I can actually see all of you coming in now. I see Dr. Tucker, I see Nash, and others, and I just can't tell you how much it means to me to see folks that are watching, and just so encouraging. But we're going to look at some things. We're going to look at some things this morning or this afternoon about Bible translation. This is not going to be in depth or anything of that nature. But one of my cousins about 2 weeks ago forwarded me I guess you might say something from Facebook, and I may tell you, I've got it sitting up over here. I may run and get it here in just a second. But someone had sent it to her, and before she shared it or copied and pasted it or whatever it is that she might that one might do in social media, she sent it to me with just this: "Is this true? Is this true?" And it was a list of statements and a picture, so to speak, of about the King James Bible and the New International Version, and there were a lot of things on there. And so I just made a very brief response to her with regard to that. And you may have seen. I tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to go ahead and grab my PC real quick, grab my laptop, just so you can see it. So you may have seen, I know you can't see the text or read the text, but you may have received some kind of forward or seen something like this in your, I feel like I'm Wilson on Home Improvement, but got the King James and the New King James and whatnot, and so get that out of the way. I just wanted you to see what the document looked like. And I wanted to look at some of the things and talk about some of these matters, because I think it's important for us to understand. Not only obviously we want to read the Bible and know the Bible, understand the Bible, but I think it's very important for us also to understand how our Bibles were put together, and why do certain translations read differently from other translations. And so what I wanted to do, and what I intend to do, is look at some of the statements that are in this particular document, and then examine those statements in view of, well, is this true? Is it not true? And, if so or if not, why? Let me get here. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read to you. I'm just going to read to you what it says and go from there. It says, this was published on May the 11th. It says, the NIV was published by Zondervan, but is now owned by HarperCollins, who also publishes the Satanic Bible and another book I'm not going to mention. And it says, the NIV and ESV have now removed 64,575 words from the Bible, including Jehovah, Calvary, Holy Ghost, and Omnipotent, to name but a few. The NIV and ESV have removed 45 complete verses. It says most of us have the Bible on our devices and phones especially, and I'm not going to mention the app because it really impugns the app. It doesn't matter what app it is, but they mentioned one. It says try and find these scriptures in the NIV and ESV on your computer, phone, or device if you are in doubt. Now, well, let me keep going. And it lists some of the verses, and we'll talk about some of these as we move forward. And then it says there is a crusade geared towards altering the Bible as we know it. NIV and ESV and many more versions are affected. And the solution is, and this is what it says, the solution. If you must use the NIV and ESV, buy and keep an earlier version of the Bible. A hard copy cannot be updated. All these changes occur when they ask you to update the app on your phone or laptop. And then you could see the image that I showed you with the KJV and NIV, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But let's kind of walk through, because, if and look, I'm not a textual critic. What I know about textual criticism, you could put in this cup and still have plenty of room for all the coffee you want to drink. But there are just I think there's some basic things that you don't need any kind of background in textual criticism to know and to understand. And there are some things, and by the way, these things come up, of course, with the content that we have on Sunday nights in particular, with our questions and answers. And by the way, I said I was going to put the number up, and I forgot to do it. I was intended to put it in the description of this video. I didn't do it. I apologize. And so, if you have questions, what I would suggest you do, if you have any questions and you don't mind them being seen by everybody, you can put them in the thread, or you can put one, give it to me in a private message, and I'll get it, but I won't get it during this broadcast. But in any event, a lot of times I get questions about, well, why is this verse, how come you read this verse and this verse is not in my Bible, or whatnot. And usually it'll be somebody that's probably reading from the English Standard. I don't know anybody in the congregation where I preach that reads the NIV, at least not as their version of choice. I mean, there's about three translations that you're going to find among the folks at Burleson, which is sufficient for this particular discussion. Most people are going to carry the King James Version or the New King James Version, or they're going to carry the English Standard Version, which is a fairly new, recent translation and carried by a lot of our people and read. Now, I got one. Philip may have a different one. He likes the Holman and others, but the reason he does that is he reads the Bible through using a different translation every year, which I think is a great idea, and I would strongly encourage anyone to do that. But in any event, we get a lot of questions about, well, why is you read this verse, but this verse is not in my Bible, and usually it's Acts 8:37, and we'll talk about Acts 8:37 in just a moment. But and so we need to understand how our Bibles are constructed and why there are certain so-called discrepancies between translations. So, but let's just go through I want to just go through the text of this particular social media forward or share, whatever you want to call it. And I wrote some notes down. So let's just kind of walk through it. And it says, the NIV is now owned by HarperCollins. And HarperCollins publishes the Satanic Bible and this book and this book and this book, as if simply because HarperCollins owns the rights to publish the NIV, that HarperCollins can make whatever changes to the NIV that they want to make, and that's just patently false. For example, whoever owns a translation or the right to publish a translation has no bearing on the translation itself. In other words, once the translation is published, or it's compiled and published and copyrighted, then you're not just at liberty to buy it and change it any way you want to change it. For example, let's just say, let's just say that I had enough money that I could buy the rights to Tom Sawyer. I can buy the publishing rights to Tom Sawyer. Now, just because I own the rights to Tom Sawyer doesn't mean that I can change the book, or maybe could be to Kill a Mockingbird, or maybe Gone with the Wind, some classic work. Just because a person owns the right to print the book doesn't mean they have the right to change the book. And so the idea that just because, and look, I'm no fan of the NIV. All right, I'll tell you right up front, I'm not a fan. But just because somebody owns the rights to a Bible translation doesn't mean that going forward, that every time you look at this translation, it's going to be different from the one that you read 6 months ago. And they're just making little minute changes. Every 6 weeks they're going to make a change, and so whoever owns a translation has no bearing on the translation itself. Now, the next claim in the forward is that the NIV and the ESV have removed 64,575 words out of the Bible. Now, again, this is problematic because whoever is saying this is probably comparing the NIV or the ESV to the King James Version. And so, and I know that just because I did a little research on the numbers that are in these particular Bibles. And so it's almost like, well, the King James Version is the standard against which all other versions have to be compared. And if it has more words than the King James Version, then that's wrong. And if it has fewer words than the King James Version, and that's wrong. And it's just foolishness, and it doesn't even purport or pretend to understand how translations are compiled. For example, I did the word search. Okay, the King James Version has 700, and this is just a rounded figure. It's within 1,000. Okay, the King James Version has 783,000 words in it. All right. The English Standard Version has 757,000 words in it, a difference of about 26,000 words. And then the NIV has 728,000 words in it, which is a difference of about 45,000 words. So the NIV has 45,000 fewer words in its text than does the King James. So how do you account for the fact that the NIV has so many fewer words than, say, the King James? Well, one way you would know and I'm not implying anybody's ignorant here, but for example, if you read Romeo and Juliet and you read Elizabethan English, Neil, I'm going to get to it. I promise you. I see your question. All right, and I'm going to get to that verse specifically. If you read Elizabethan English and you read Romeo and Juliet or some other work of Shakespeare or some other writing of that time, you're going to find, if you're like me, you're like, man, these guys use a lot of unnecessary words. And that's a very simple explanation as to why more modern translations have fewer words in them than some of the older translations. The way that words and colloquialisms were spoken are different today than when they were, say, when the King James was translated, in 1611. And so, the word count is not problematic. The difference is what's the comparison? Is it, for example, is it possible? And I'll do Acts 8:37 too. I promise, Neil. The word count is not the issue. But what if the King James had words that didn't belong in it? In other words, what if there were some words that were added to the King James Version that really didn't belong there? So you see, the problem is, if the King James Version is going to be the standard, then the King James Version has to be perfect. And I can assure you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, with no hesitation whatsoever, I'm going to tell you right now, the King James Version is not a perfect translation of the Bible. There is no such thing as a perfect translation of the Bible. There's no such thing as an inspired translation of the Bible. And so the idea that there are different words or fewer words is something that is very important for us to understand as to why certain translations have more or a greater number or a fewer number of words. For example, I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson. If you've heard me preach for very long at all, you know that this is indeed the case. But Jordan Peterson, I heard him say this as he was talking about writing his book, 12 Rules for Life. And here's what he said. He said, I rewrote every sentence in that book 15 times. Now, I don't know if he literally meant 15 times or if he was, using hyperbole. And somebody said, well, why did you write and rewrite every sentence so many times? He said, because I wanted to be as concise as I possibly could. In other words, I wanted to say everything I wanted to say it exactly right, as precisely as I possibly could, which means he rewrote a number of times, and that not all of his sentence rewrites had the same number of words. Now, when you're talking about a difference of, say, 40,000 words against almost 800,000, you're talking about a very small portion. 80,000 words would be 10%, so 45,000 words is going to be about a 5% difference, which means that for every 100 words, a modern translation could have shrunk that down to 95 words, and that would account for every single difference. Now, in the last 5 years, I've written 2 Bible blogs, 2 Bible reading blogs. One was called 1 in 4, and it was reading the Old Testament in a year and the New Testament 4 times in a year. And I wrote on every single day's reading. I had a little blurb. When I finished with that after 360 days, my little book had over 185,000 words in it. And that is equal to, I wrote that down. No, it had 136,000 words in it. I'm sorry, it had 136,000 words in it. That's approaching the number of words that are in the entire New Testament. This past year, I wrote another Bible reading blog on the New Testament, and it has 103,000 words. Now, when I was writing these particular blogs, I did. I made each day fit one page that I had set up in Microsoft Word. In other words, I had so much space to fill, and if I wrote too much, I had to go back and edit, which means that I'd go back and I'd write fewer. I'd find, now how can I shrink this down and make it more concise, because I had a limited number of space or a limited amount of space. Well, if you don't have that, guess what's going to happen? You're going to use more words. I've written a ton of manuscripts for lectureships and other religious literature, and I have say, all right, we want you to write 15 to 1,800 words, and I get in here and I'm not done writing yet, and I've got 1,750 words, and I still got some more things I want to say. So what do I have to do? I have to go back and make it more concise and make my writing more concise so that I can stay within the confines. But if I didn't have those confines, I might end up like William F. Buckley Jr. I might use 50 words when 10 words would be sufficient. And so there's a lot to be said about the process of translation and being concise. Also, we don't say things We don't say things the same in 2020 that they did in 1620. And so there's just a lot, the idea of words, and again, and even though it's not said, I know that they're comparing these words or these word counts to the King James Version of the Bible. And so that's not a very good way. And then on the in the next section it says, they have removed words such as Jehovah, Calvary, Holy Ghost, and omnipotent, to name but a few. All right. So the word Jehovah is from a tetragram. I think that's what it's called. And nobody knows that the word is Jehovah because the vowels were taken out of it. And so we've done in other words, they've done the best that they can. But the word Jehovah is basically a translation, and at best a translation. And there could be, it is well the case that other words, word or words could be used to accurately represent whatever that word means in the original text. Now, the idea that they've taken Calvary out, now let's just talk about that one for a minute. The word Calvary's been taken out of the Bible. You know, the NIV or whatever doesn't use the word Calvary. Do you know how many times that word appears in the Bible? In the King James Bible? You know how many times you find the word Calvary in the Bible? One time. One time. And it's not that they took it out. They put something better in. The word Calvary comes from a Greek word from which we get our English word cranium. Cranium. That's why in one place in our New Testament, it's referred to as Golgotha, the place of the skull, cranium. But for some reason, we have the word Calvary. Now, the replacement for Calvary is the skull. Now, you tell me, what is a better rendering of cranium? If you're going to try, again, I'm not defending the NIV. Well, I guess I am in this case, but you know, what's a better way to render cranium? Calvary or the skull? Because the object of what you're trying to do the object of translation is to take the word in the original and convey it in English in a way that best suits the original. And the skull is far more accurate than Calvary. In the modern language, Calvary doesn't mean anything. But everybody knows what the skull is. And so this idea that the NIV's out to get rid of Calvary is just foolish. Now, here's and one of the problems is this. Well, we've written a bunch of songs. You know, my Uncle Waif's favorite song it's At Calvary, or sometimes it's called Years I Spent in Vanity and Pride. Great song, you know, At Calvary. Over and over, At Calvary. And all of our songs, you know, Lead Me to Calvary. And all this song writing uses Calvary, a word that only appears one time in our New Testament. But because we got all these songs, if you get rid of Calvary, then all of a sudden you're a heretic. Even though the word that you use to replace it is a more accurate representation when it says the skull than to use the word Calvary. And so that's just not a very good argument, you know, to take a word that appears one time, especially when they put a better word in its place. All right, now it says the NIV and ESV have removed 45 complete verses. Now, again, removed it how? Removed it because it's in my King James Version and it may not be in the NIV or the ESV. Again, this is it's a terrible argument, and it also underlines the fact that somebody has no idea how Bibles are translated. You know, it's not like the Bible exists in a single document, and it's just your job to take a single document and then translate those words. You know, the Bible is translated from literally tens of thousands of documents. In fact, the manuscript evidence for the Bible, and the New Testament in particular, is greater than any ancient document by 100 million miles. There's far more biblical evidence for the New Testament than, say, Aristotle's rhetoric, or who was Aristotle wrote rhetoric? Yeah, or one of any of the ancient philosophers, and certainly more manuscript evidence than there is for the Shakespeare stuff. And the Shakespeare stuff is only about 400 years old. And so, or 500 years old. So the idea that entire verses have been left out just says, well, I don't understand how the Bible's put together. And those that translate the Bible use what's called a set. They'll use a set or a compilation of pieces of manuscript evidence. And there are a number of ways that you can use the Nestle's, you can use the United Bible Society, you can use what's called the majority text. And so whatever translation or whatever the translating committee intends to use, it'll work from a singular set of manuscripts that have been gathered and then kind of honed down into a singular. But still, there are a lot of small distinctions there. And so, does every verse that, for example, does every verse that's in the King James Version belong there? If we're going to accuse certain translations of leaving verses out, wouldn't it be just as a valid argument to say that some verses may have been put in that did not belong? For example, you could read, and I don't have time. I've spent far more time on this than I intended. For example, 1 John 5 and verses 6 through 8. There's, verse 7 and part of verse 8, in my opinion, absolutely do not belong in the text. Now, I think they are late additions to the text. And so with that in mind, the King James has added words that really ought not be in the text. And so, what's worse, adding a verse or taking one out? Well, if I read Revelation 22, verses 18 and 19, I find that you're in danger both ways. You don't get to add to or take away from God's word. Deuteronomy 4:2, Proverbs 30, do not add to his words. And so the process of translation is a difficult one, and one that requires great care. And so depending on which set of documents one might use, for example, the two texts that were there that were shown to be left out, for example, Matthew 18:11. Matthew 18:11. And then I read the New King James because it corresponds to the King James as closely as anything else. And I used the King James all my life until 2008. So that's why I went to a modern language, but I went to something that mirrors the King James. And the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which is lost. Now that verse is missing in the NIV, Matthew 18:11. But it's in Luke 19 and verse 10. So in other words, what doctrine, if Matthew 18:11 is not in the NIV, is there somewhere else I can look in the New Testament? For example, in the Luke 19, in the account of Zacchaeus, where it says the Son of Man has come to seek and save that which is lost. So, if it's not in Matthew, if Matthew 18:11 is not there, but Luke 19:10 is, where's the conspiracy? Where's the conspiracy? There is no conspiracy. They just used a different set of manuscript documents. Either, again, the Nestle or the UBS. And if you look, and of course, if you look, a lot of times in your Bibles, you'll see margin notes that say NU. These verses missing in NU, which simply means the Nestle and United Bible Society. But it's present with what they might say in the majority text. In other words, the majority of the manuscript evidence says this verse belongs in the text. But these two gatherings of documents predominantly do not have them. And so, all right, Matthew 18:11 is not in there. But it's Luke 19:10 is, which says the exact same thing. Acts 8:37 is the one I mentioned earlier that seems to, cause people a lot of consternation with the statement of the eunuch that he believes that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. If you have an NIV or an ESV, your Bible goes from Acts 8:36 to Acts 8:38. There's no 37 in there. And so you're looking at, why is it missing? Well, because a different set of manuscripts didn't have it, as opposed to, say, the majority text, which did have it. The question is this. And by the way, I think that the narrative makes more sense with it, but I don't know that it necessarily has to be in there. All right, is there any other verse I can read in the New Testament that teaches me I have to confess that Jesus is the Son of God, like Matthew 10:32 or Romans 10:9 and 10, or as the Great Confession or the Good Confessions mentioned, 1 Timothy chapter 5. I mean, there's all types of passages in the New Testament that teach the necessity of confessing that He is the Christ. And so, the presence or absence of Acts 8:37 is interesting, especially among some of my Baptist friends, because that's not the confession that they make before they're baptized. The confession that the Baptist church teaches is that you have to confess that Jesus has already saved you before you're baptized. Why are you going to fuss over Acts 8:37 when you don't even practice it? I mean, the confession that's made before baptism, if you're going to be strict, is that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, or He is the Lord, Romans 10:9 and 10. Nobody ever confessed that they were saved before they were baptized, but every Baptist church, every Baptist preacher I've ever known teaches that you confess that you're saved before you're baptized. Something to the effect of, do you believe that God has, for Christ's sake, forgiven you of your sins? And then when you say yes, then they baptize you because you believe you're already saved. You'll never find that in the New Testament. Never. Not one place. Lost people are baptized, not saved people. And look, I'll debate anybody, anywhere, anytime on that principle. That's just so clear, but yet so many people don't see it. So, Acts 8:37 doesn't affect any teaching in any way with regard to baptism. And so, and again, the people that are fussing about it don't even practice Acts 8:37. And so that certainly is problematic. And then I want to make mention of this. The American Standard Version of 1901 is generally considered to be the most accurate translation of all time. It's the most accurate translation. And yet, guess what? All the verses that are missing in the NIV and all the verses that are missing in the ESV are missing in the ASV of 1901 and the revised version of 1885. So why is this just now becoming a problem? When did people decide they wanted to start worshiping the King James Version of the Bible? Where were these people for the last 119 years? How come they haven't been fussing on the ASV or the revised? Well, most people you can't even buy these Bibles for the most part anymore. They've fallen out of use. But what might be said of the NIV and ESV is exactly true for what people considered the most literally accurate translation ever produced in 1901 in the American Standard. Well, why did the American Standard differ from the King James? It used a different manuscript set. And so this is just not a very good argument. And the last thing, and I'll close. I've gone too long. It says, if you must use the NIV and ESV, buy and keep an earlier version of the Bible. A hard copy cannot be updated. These changes occur when they ask you to update the app on your phone or laptop. That's just patently false. It couldn't be more wrong. I mean, look, if you bought a hard copy of the NIV, it's going to read the same as the electronic copy. If you have a hard copy of the KJV, it's going to read the same as the electronic copy. They don't change the version on you when they update the app. It's just, I don't know, just kind of throw up your hands and just scratch your head and just hope people open their eyes and just see, how silly some of these arguments are. And yet, here's one single thing, and I bet it had 3,000 or 4,000 shares and just all kind of comments. And so I appreciate my cousin sending me this, and I'll close with this. I appreciate her sending it to me because she didn't want to send on. She was concerned that it might be true, but she didn't want to send on something that she didn't know to be true. So therefore, she did her best to investigate, and she asked me, and I did a little work for her because I knew it wasn't true. And so, and that's another thing we want to be concerned with as we close out is be careful about the things that we forward or that we share, particularly on Facebook or Twitter or other forms of social media. It's really easy just to hit share, or it's real easy just to hit forward or whatever. But there's a lot of good tools out there. If you've got Facebook, you've got Google. And if you've got Google, you've got enough evidence to show that a lot of this stuff it's just not so. So we want to be careful about what we forward. And I appreciate my cousin's concern. First of all, was this true? But secondly, I want to know if it's true before I pass it on. And so we want to be careful in that respect. All right. I just want to let everybody know how much I appreciate you watching. I saw a lot of my old high school friends and old college friends chiming in that they were watching. And this, like I said, it's the first time I've used my phone in a long, long time. And we're thankful for you joining us in this period of Bible study tonight. We'll archive this. You'll be able to see it, and we'll upload it to YouTube over the next few days. But thank you all so much for watching tonight, and appreciate the comments that I could see coming through. And again, appreciate it. Thank you all so much. Have a great night, and Lord willing, we'll see you Wednesday night at 6:30.